Well, hello there, Apple Bites. This is your Apple Bite, written Ralph talking to you straight from our show here, Apple Bites, where we take a bite out of things, share it with you, and let you know what we think about it. And today we are taking a bite out of Robo 7 and Jay Huwer. Say hello, guys.
What's up?
What's going on? I didn't know we were live.
These guys are fantastic. They for their own reasons. I'm going to start them off by Robo. Go ahead. Do your intro. Let the people know who you are, what you do, all that stuff.
Sure. Robo 7 Art, aka John Bellotti Jr. I'm an illustrator based out of Brooklyn, New York. By day, I work as a scenic artist on film and TV, but with the strikes going on, I'm unemployed. But I'm okay with that because I started my own Kaiju convention this year, where I sell my officially licensed Ultraman shirts and my Kaiju art. That's the short of it.
Beautiful, just beautiful, and it was a great convention. I for your freshman year as a convention, I was mightily impressed.
Well, thank you. I had about 30 days to promote and put on the show, so I take it as a compliment. Thank you.
No, and it was a compliment, and it kind of made like I've been hearing a lot about Industry City and all the conventions people are hosting there, and I can see why people like it so much. It's like its own community, and it seems to have its own built-in audience.
Yeah, that was definitely the big draw of doing it at that space, which I've been trying to do it for years at Japan Village, and they just never got back to me. And then I met my partner, Anthony, at BK1 Productions, and he's all in. So now that the first show is a success, we're ready to do the second one next year. So we have a lot of big plans for next year. That's all I'm going to say.
Dude, I'm so happy you're saying next year, because after I was there and I had fun and we did all the beautiful interviews and we showcased all the stuff that was there. I kind of remembered, because I grew up on Thanksgiving, Godzilla, King Kong, all that stuff that we would have every year, and the movies playing all during the year as well. Yeah. And I didn't remember how much of a love I have for the kaijus and Godzilla and all that stuff until I was there at the con.
No, it was definitely the vibe was great. We had a lot of great attendees. All the vendors were great. I made sure to curate them all, and just doing Comic-Con the week after, I think I was half asleep for the whole 4 days of that show because I was so tired. But it was great, like seeing people that were at my show coming up to me and like thanking me or congratulating me. And, I didn't even know I knew that it was going to be good, but I know it was going to be like that good. So I was like very surprised and just happy, man, just really happy. And it just, proved my point that there's a market here for this. So I'm glad I did it. And thanks for stopping by and helping me promote the show. I appreciate it.
Dude, you have me anytime you want me to go promote this thing. Enjoy the kaiju, enjoy Godzilla, and oddly enough, when we're about to talk to Jay, there was some wrestling there as well. So the combination kind of works. And I do remember that there was a couple of shows that had kaiju wrestling.
Players dressed in kaiju costumes.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I have an 11-year-old that's like a Godzilla fanatic, so
yeah.
Oh, and they can wrestle with like a little miniature city as a ring.
That was cool. what Godzilla vs. Kong was, right? Giant, massive free-for-all wrestling match.
Exactly.
No holds barred. You got it.
Oh man, it's just beautiful. And I gotta say, Robo, your art just like really encompasses and showcases, your love for kaiju.
Thank you. I started as a fan artist, and then I just, was doing a convention circuit for years. And, when you do the fan art thing, I could be like, traveling the country like some people I know, and I'm married and I got a mortgage, so it's kind of tough to do that.
It is.
So I just had to figure out, when COVID hit, I kind of had to figure out, like, what do? I have a day job. I'm not hurting for cash. So that's when I started looking to get a license for either Godzilla or Ultraman, and Ultraman got back to me first. So now I'm Team Ultraman, and they're very happy with the shirts I've been making for them, and they're excited about Kaiju Brooklyn too, man. So they're.
Dude, I know they are because they let you show that movie there.
Yeah, and they had a table there too, so they're gonna probably have a bigger presence next year. Yeah. So I still got we still got to have some discussions, but they're looking to expand Ultraman here in the States, and if I'm the guy that does the job of like showcasing this character here in a premier space, then I'll take the responsibility on, man. I mean, I love the character, I love the property. I have no problems doing that whatsoever. So.
Oh, it sounds like a blast to me because we love Ultraman as well.
Yeah, I remember that they like when I was little, they used to show Ultraman on like Saturday morning or maybe like Sunday morning or something, and like I used to get up to watch that. I don't remember anything about what it's about, sadly, but I just remember Ultraman.
Yeah, it's basically the Japanese Superman. I mean, that was their answer to Superman, and technically he is more popular in Japan than Godzilla. And over here, Godzilla's more popular, but they're making a big push over here in the States to get Ultraman bigger. There's actually a Netflix animated movie coming out next year.
Nice.
Sick.
Co-directed by Shannon Tyndall, who did Kubo and the Two Strings. Industrial Light and Magic is doing the animation for it, so it's gonna be really big. It's gonna be a big year for Ultraman next year. So we're excited. We're very excited about it.
Well, you did a good blast off for it because I loved how many Ultramans were there. The cosplay was great there as well. So and that mask is just legendary.
Yeah, it's a pretty pretty much. Yeah.
So Jay, we're about to jump into this because wrestling, kaiju, it just all goes together. and we know, Jay, that you're a big wrestling fan as well, especially because you tend to hang out with a guy named Kip.
Oh, let's not talk about Kip. I can't talk about him anymore.
Oh my God!
Listen, I'm here. Listen, all right. So I'll introduce myself first, then we'll take the ad break because I can do that.
There you go.
Jay Huwer. I've been writing comics. I'm a teacher by day, writer by night. So I spend the majority of my days hanging out with 6th grade students, teaching them about reading and writing. When I have that spare time with my own kids, I'll write comics because that's just a passion. It's a love. Today I'm here because of the Adventures of Justicane and Potico. So there's your advertisement, right? Currently running on Kickstarter. It's doing okay. I am not. Some people look at those numbers and they're like, "Oh, it's so disappointing." I'm like, I knew exactly what to expect when I jumped on Kickstarter with this one. This book comes from that love of wrestling. Anyone who's familiar with Kickstarter, it's an adult audience because the adults have the money to spend. So I took a shot in the dark. I'm like, let me just run this. I'm going to run a soft campaign and just go with it, run it for 30 days and have a blast with it. The book itself comes from, back in, I'm going to end up talking about Kip. I don't want to talk about Kip today. But back in the day, Kip, for those of you who don't know, Francis Kip Stevens, he and I have been like amazingly best friends since we were teenagers, right?
Oh, yeah.
And way back in the day, back in the Wizard World days, they used to run contests and they did a video contest. The video contest was just, make a superhero video. So I actually made this video called Jackpot, where these two characters, hence the name Jackpot Comics, by the way, these two characters, they just go at kind of like a kaiju Japanime manga type of battle where one character, my character, was trying to figure out what the famous line from Mary Jane was, face a tiger, you just hit and then this guy Kip comes in and he just crushes the comic, crushes the thing. We'll never know the famous line. It'll never happen. And then we transform into these superheroes and we battle in the snow because the day we filmed happened to be a snowstorm of like 2 feet of snow over here.
That can either be fun or horrifying to wrestle in, like no in between.
It actually, I still have copies of this movie. It actually turned out to be hysterical. I nearly broke his rib, so
whoa.
Literally, I literally, if you ever see him at a convention when I'm not around, you can ask him about it. He'll tell you about the broken rib and he'll I slipped in the snow, hit a rib. He's been paying me back for that one ever since. So COVID hits, you're speaking of COVID over there, Robo. And we have this, my sister-in-law is talking to me and she's just like, you remember that stupid movie you made? I'm like, oh yeah, I love that movie. He's like, I'm surprised you didn't make it a comic book. And I'm like, oh, challenge accepted. And here's Justicane and Potico. I wrote it during COVID. I hunted for the artist, saved up the money, because that's always the key to this stuff, is like
Oh, yeah,
the
it is.
production time and everything. And the character over there, you can see the two characters right there. You got Justicane on the left, that top first panel, and you got Potico on the right. Justicane is, I'll have to admit it, back in the day, I wrote it based on Kip and his character in that book. I sent them the script. There he is, bottom left. I sent him the script, and he never read it. I was like, I was like, why wouldn't you read it?
That sounds like Friends.
Yeah, that's a true friend, actually.
So we'll get into more of that. But you can see, this book really takes in, and you can see right there the glamour guys. That's one of my favorite shots. Elias Martin's on the art with Seb Valencia on the colors and letters. I mean, those two characters, if they don't scream nostalgia, the wrestling nostalgia in here, it really combines WWE wrestling with the comedy of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And then
it's very aggressively like 90s, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, that was the plan. And that comes from, like I said, nostalgia. 90. I have a shirt right here, right? I'm going to show you this shirt because I took it out of retirement today. My first ever WWF wrestling show. I go to Madison Square Garden and I don't know what to expect. My friends are like, oh, let's go to this wrestling show. So I'm like, all right, that sounds fun. I've never been to one before. Madison Square Garden, September 1997. Any wrestling fan knows the show I'm talking about right off of that time frame, because it's Stone Cold Steve Austin stunning Vince McMahon for the first time, getting dragged out in handcuffs. The police are coming. Cactus Jack comes out this was like, I'm hooked. I was hooked in the 80s. I was hooked in the early 90s. But at this point, I'm like hooked teenage. And I buy my first shirt. And this is the shirt I buy. Now, keep in mind, this is Austin 316 era. Here's my shirt. Right there.
Oh, and 316.
I still have it. I retired it as soon as it started wearing. I mean, this is well worn right here. So that's one of the shirts I brought down here. I took it out of retirement just for your show. And right there, I mean, everybody's like, why are you buying the Owen 316 shirt? I'm like, because I just broke your neck. And that was like, it just starts. You're now binging wrestling. You're binging The Rock, the Nation of Domination. You're thinking back to Hogan, shortly thereafter, the NWO is huge. And that love for wrestling, it's not just in me, but it's in, again, Kip, he's now a pro wrestler. I've known him since I remember having a conversation with him. And he's like, oh, what do I do? I want to train for wrestling. And I just looked at him like, so train for wrestling. He's like, what? And now he's running around, the local tri-state area, wrestling every weekend, doing all this stuff. And like I said, I send him the script and the clown can't even read the thing. Yeah, I mean, this is the same guy that earlier in his wrestling career, I teach sixth graders. So I'm looking at how can I inspire my sixth graders with my writing? And I send this guy, he's like, oh, I have a merch table. I'm like, you want a poster? And he's like, what? I'm like, why don't we do this? You're a good guy. You're Francis Kip Stevens. You're, the kid who's gotten bullied throughout all the time. And I wrote a 1-page story for him and had it made so he could sell it at his table. And it's an anti-bullying poster about how this young kid is bullied in his youth. He's bullied throughout his life. And there it is. And you can see it here. He's getting bullied in that first panel over there. And then we go through the whole thing and he's training hard, saying his prayers, eating his vitamins, brother. And you could see him right. And this is hard to see. I couldn't find a good digital clear copy. But he comes in and he ends up fighting his bully at the end. He stands up for what he believes in. So I've been working with Kip for a long time. And, the Justicane book was a big deal. Unfortunately, somewhere in life, he just turned his back on us. He became this guy who's like, he's now Evil Kip. Who would have seen that one coming? That's what he goes by. If you look up his handle on Twitter, Facebook, and it's Evil Kip. Francis Kip Stevens, now Evil Kip. And it's a rough thing. This is the same guy that my kids laugh when we call him Kip because they've known him since they were born. He was here that whole time, and now he's out in the world. I mean, it's tough because I think about him and I'm like, he wrestles for Creative Pro Wrestling and they don't even want him. They kicked him out. He has a show on Friday. I'm like, oh, you're going to help promote the book? Never responds to my text messages. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what is going on with this guy? He's probably out there. He probably knows about this. I did him a favor. And I created a cover specifically for the Kickstarter called the Kip cover, the Evil Kip cover. where,
Nice.
I put him on the cover of a comic book. I'm like, hey, man, check this out. This might be awesome. No response. Nothing. I'm like, what is going on here? So if you actually scroll down, this is the James Avila cover. I mean, look at this fantastic piece of work. This guy, James Avila, is a local artist over here on the island. And, I ran into him. I'm like, oh, you want to do a cover? I mean, he comes up with this. That's
Nice.
genius.
I know James. He's a great guy.
And then down here, you go down just a little bit further, and you have Justicane dropping an elbow on Evil Kip right there, and Potico's in the back. Potico, he might scream to another wrestler. I did pull another shirt out of retirement, because here's another one. If you know the band, you know the band. Where might Potico come from? Right there.
Oh, hold on.
I'm not gonna say names, because we don't need to get lawsuits going at us. Even though Evil Kip might, he looked at that cover. Like I said, no response. He's probably out there bad mouthing this campaign on his socials. He's probably telling people not to back it. Like, this is horrible. Things that he would say. That goes about by him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, he got me so mad. I would challenge him to a wrestling match, but I mean, the guy would probably beat me down in 5 minutes. He's that
Would he show up?
I mean, I would have to show up to him if I was like that kind of person. I'm not a fighter. I mean, but I would have to show up, because let's face it, if I was going to challenge him to a wrestling match, I would have to go to where the wrestling matches are. And if I'm being realistic, it wouldn't end well for me. I know that. I'm aware. I'm not trained in MMA. I'm not trained in wrestling. I'm not trained in boxing, karate, or anything like that. So I would just go there, show up, and probably get beat down for, like, he'd probably just have fun. Just, like I said, I nearly broke his rib. So he's probably like, here's your receipt, buddy. But somewhere along the lines of history, someone taught me the pen is mightier than the sword. So, once I realized, like, this guy is just written off my family, I figured, why not do something amazing here? Send it to him as a courtesy. Like I said, no response. But I mean, I can't beat him down in the ring, but Justicane can. So there we go.
I thought you were going to take that in a completely direction where it's like, the pen is mightier than the sword. So I'm going to show up to a wrestling match with a pen.
Sword pen. You need a sword pen. So, sorry. You know what? I don't want to get into Evil Kip on this one. I apologize for going off on a tangent there. I'd rather talk about the book and how amazing the book is. Like I said, Bill and Ted meets WWE wrestling. I mean, nostalgia all over the place. You get a good. I do think you get a good vibe if you feel any kind of, like, environment of wrestling and it makes you smile. I think this book is for you. I mean, if you like Bill and Ted humor, that's the goal here, is just to get people to laugh. It was done on a dare, so to speak. So I'm like, I went full comedy on this thing, and that's very subjective. So I'm hoping that those people out there who like to laugh will find that humor and find it funny. And those who don't, I mean, let me know. I'm all good. Read the book.
The world needs more comedy. Honestly, there are so many people who are like, here's my grim, dark version of this. Here's this, like, super angsty story. Like, we need more funny things. So I appreciate you doing, like, an actual funny comic.
Well, like I said, hopefully it's funny. Humor's hard. Humor's
It is,
very, very
absolutely.
hard to do.
It is.
People don't get your sense of humor all the time. I'm naturally sarcastic. So sometimes, you text the sarcasm and it's bad because someone gets very offended by it.
Oh, God. And then you have to have, like, a really awkward, long, drawn-out conversation where it's like they're offended and then they've offended you. And then it's like somewhere you meet in the middle and you realize that it was because they misread, like, one thing.
Yeah.
That happens with me and my bestie all the time.
Well, what's comical is when my 11-year-old, my son, tries to be sarcastic, because 11-year-old sarcasms, when they're, like, really fishing it out and trying to figure out what sarcasm is.
And they're also really vicious too.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
But that's okay. I mean, again, this is my life, right? I live with 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds. That's like most of my day. So you get used to that, and you kind of like, all right, you know what to expect half the time when it comes to that viciousness. So.
That's a definite. I've dealt with enough kids for most of my life, so it's funny that you said that, Mata, because I've been actually talking about this recently. Is I hate this darkening of everything. It's dark comics, it's dark superheroes, it's dark this, it's dark that, and I feel like the fun of things is just gotten lost.
Yeah, we need like a reason to smile and laugh instead of just like, okay, well, this guy, like, he wants revenge for this and that and super sad and alone. Like, we have enough of that.
And I've done the dark. I have a book called Saturn and Orion, which is very dark. But somewhere along the lines of I've been writing for probably 20 years, just because you know, just working on the craft and writing and cracking stories and just writing for fun. And somewhere along the lines, I just looked at things and I'm like, all right, I'm tired of dark. Like, let's bring something bright. Let's bring some just lightness to these books, you know. And then it became my own mission to start writing books for children. I mean, my goal in life would be to write books that kids can afford to buy. You know, that's a big one. You know, kids go into a comic shop, they look at a book. You have adults who go into a comic shop and they're like, $5 for Batman? I can't pay $5 for Batman. But it's hard. Printing costs, art costs. I mean, Robo.
Oh my God. And it's just skyrocketing because of like the whole paper shortage thing and like printers being like overworked and stuff. Like, I remember trying to get a quote for like a hardcover book, and like I had gotten a quote in August, and then by like September the price had doubled, and I'm just like, what is going on here? It's ridiculous.
It's becoming hard, and I do understand, you know, again, the big publishers, I understand that, but that's how I talk when I talk to publishers at shows. I'm like, man, my dream is to write 99-cent comic books for kids.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I guess you could get away with it digitally, but physical comics.
Yeah, it's you know, it's a hard sell, but again, that's why, you know, I'm on Kickstarter. I'm aware of the audience that this book is for, and whoever wants it, you know, shoot onto that Kickstarter. You know, $5 for a PDF is pretty much there. But if you want a physical copy, you know, they're all there. And if you want to really aggravate that Kip guy, that evil Kip exclusive, it's the exclusive book, exclusive to Kickstarter.
Yeah, dude, stick it to Kip. Buy the book.
Stick it to Kip.
That's a good slogan.
That should be the slogan.
Yeah, I'm not going back to the Kip route. Okay, all right. He was a good guy. He was. I can't knock him. He was always good to my kids. Something happened to him. You know, you spoke about darkness. Who knows? Maybe he read too many dark comics. Maybe he was.
Well, you know, Evil Kip was a good character, and you know exactly what happened. He probably went down that dark path. Like, I need to be darker.
I mean, also, like, once you learn the inner workings of the wrestling world, it's pretty depressing.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean Dark Side of the Ring? Maybe he watched a couple of those episodes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I listened to a podcast on Vince McMahon and like all of the terrible things that he's done, and I was just like, oh, that explains a lot. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not in the locker room over there, but you know, I've seen a trend on wrestling comics, and I'm hoping that this one continues that trend. Who knows?
Robo, speaking of which, you know, your art's fantastic. Have you considered doing a comic book? Because I think it'll be a good sell.
I actually wanted to be a comic artist like my whole life. And then I went to art school, FIT. And when I was in art school, 9/11 happened. So I was about 21 years old. And that kind of changed my whole perspective on life, to sort of like live through that. And I don't know, comics just didn't feel like something I wanted to do because been dead, because I was going to FIT and, you know, my train line went right underneath the towers. So
I know which train you're talking about.
Yeah, I was the 1 and 9 train coming from Staten Island. So, you know, thinking about, like, it just put a lot of things in perspective. And Marvel was sort of coming out of bankruptcy at the time, and comics just didn't seem like what they were back in the early 90s, like when McFarlane and Jim Lee and those guys were, you know, hitting the scene. So I kind of like just shifted gears and got into the film and TV industry as a scenic artist instead. And I'm glad I did, because now I have like a pension. And I have
you would not have that doing comics.
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Definitely.
And, you know, I'm friends with, you know, guys that do comics and people that work on comic books. And, you know, I don't know, man. It's just like the hours they put in. I mean, I could put that into my job and I could work like a month and then take like 2 months off if I want. But comic artists, you know, the money, and it's not, I would do it for money because I'm not in, you know, that's not my thing. Well, I mean, making money obviously is my thing, but, you know, I would do comics because I love it. It's just, like I said, the amount of work you put in, the way the publishers just, you know, take advantage of the artists. It just didn't seem worth it to me. But I did like an indie book, and I said, okay, I did it. You know, I did my 22 pages. I would do covers. I mean, that's about the most I would do right now. And they've been trying to get me into Marvel, doing like some stuff for the Ultraman books. But that's, you know, cracking the comic book industry is one of the hardest things you could do.
Yeah. It
I'm
is.
sure Jay, you can attest to that. It's almost as hard as like going to Hollywood and thinking you're going to be an actor in a year or something like that. So
But you're
that's
waiting tables for like 10 years instead.
yeah. And if I waited for Marvel to call me back or get back to me, it's like I can keep bugging them, but I got my own stuff going on. I'm just sort of like I kind of make my own destiny with the things I pursue. I'm not going to wait around for them, and I'm not going to pursue them because it's like they're going to hire me or like Olivia, like Oliver Copiel, or whoever, the other hot artists is, which is what they've been doing for the books. But yes, I would love to do a cover. I mean, I've done some indie stuff, but nothing major. That's my long-winded explanation.
Dude, he's talking Godzilla. Sorry, this would be Ninja Prime. He's making his cameo. They're talking Godzilla. What do you have to say about Godzilla?
He's the best fictional thing in the world.
What's your favorite Godzilla?
Probably 2019.
What do you know about Justicane and Potico?
Absolutely nothing.
How evil is Kip?
Very.
Very evil. All right. There you go. There's your cameo. Get out of here. Very evil. I'm surprised he didn't giggle at the name Kip. That's usually what I get.
But Robo, I know exactly what you're coming from because for a long, even now, people still think that you make it once you make it to the big two, but you don't really make much money with them.
No.
Mm-mm.
No.
That's why it's like a myth, and I'm like, just do your own independent comics. You're better off.
Yeah, like if you when I was like doing the math, and I said to myself, if I did like an indie book and I sold like 30,000 a month, which is like nothing compared to like the 110,000 they sell on Batman. But if I'm making $1 off of each book, that kind of makes more sense to me financially. But you got to get to that point to be able to move 30,000 books in a month. And it's a grind. It's definitely a grind. The dream was to like work on X-Men or Spider-Man and then go do my own indie book, be like McFarlane. But the whole, those days I think are pretty much over, especially after the Cliffhanger imprint sort of imploded. And, those guys all went and did their own thing anyway. But yeah, it makes, if I was to ever do comics, it would definitely be with an indie book. It would not be with the big two. If I did the big two, it would only be to get my name out there, basically.
Exactly. And that's what we need to use them for. We need to use them as a stepping stone, because you're not going to get rich off of them. You're not going to get anything off of them, and most of the times they'll just rob stuff from you.
Yeah.
I love that the tables have turned, because it always used to be like, all right, I'm going to do my own indie book until like the big two notice me and pick me up. But now it's, because the big two are kind of like crashing and burning now. So everyone's just like, oh, if I get in with them, then I can make my own stuff more popular. And like, that's kind of delicious. Like, as someone who has always been more into like the indie side and has been doing like their own indie comics, like I find it delightfully petty. But I'm just a petty kind of person.
Well, look at The Walking Dead, for example. I never knew who Robert Kirkman was until my ex-girlfriend asked me to watch the show, and I said, "Oh, it's based on a comic." And then I looked it up, and I think Kirkman did stuff for the big two, but his whole thing was with that book, Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Same with Saga.
That's how he made his name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same with the Goon. Eric Powell. They all just did the indie stuff, and they blew up. For every one indie book that breaks out, there's like 10 that don't. Or
there's like 100 that don't. Like, there's an astounding number that don't. Like maybe even 1,000.
Right. And that's probably not even counting like the whole Kickstarter element of things. If you're looking, you scroll through previews and you would see there's a lot of books out there. Kirkman's definitely a special case. He really is. Like there's so much. He did work with Marvel. He did, the Marvel Zombies and all that stuff. But I forgot about that. Yeah. I think around that time, he basically said, why would I want to have somebody telling me what to do? And at that point, I think he bought into Image, and that's when Skybound came out. He had his books, and look at that guy now. Like I said, he's probably the exception to the big norm. Then you go with the big names. It's like for every big name there is, how many lesser known named artists or writers or colorists, poor colorists, or letterers. There's a whole crew out there that.
Well, Jay, like look at have you seen like any modern artist alley at these giant conventions? I mean,
I was at New York Comic Con last week, and
Yeah.
Artist Alley. It was interesting because that's where I like to hang out. I like to talk to I've gotten to know quite a number of artists over the years. A lot of them encouraged me. I got to give a shout out to Dirk Manning. Derek was encouraging me when I first told him about the Justicane book. He was encouraging me. He's like, "Get it done, man. Get it done." And he's been in my corner like the entire time.
Man. Yeah.
He's great. And then another good friend of mine who worked at the Big Two, Justin Gray. He worked on like Power Girl, Jonah Hex, and now he's running pretty solid Kickstarters. These are people who have carved a path, and I'm looking at Artist Alley again. Some of the artists I've known for a long time are telling me, it was hard for them to get a table because they don't have an agent. And I was like, ooh, what's going on there? And then I walked down the aisles, and you could see a lot of agents buying up basically half aisles, whole aisles. And I was like, oh, that's different. That's interesting. I've never seen some of these, I've seen writers in Artist Alley. I was like, I've never seen these writers in an Artist Alley before. Which was cool.
Like that shouldn't be allowed to have an agent buy up like so many tables.
Yeah, I heard it was bad. Like they were buying up like whole entire like rows of 12 tables, which is kind of crazy if you think
That's
about it.
Dirty.
Yeah, I mean, I got denied this year, but I always get waitlisted. So I got an exhibitor booth, and I was shocked at how many artists were upstairs in the exhibition hall this year. There was so many artists upstairs, like more than I've ever seen. But to my point that I was sort of getting at, I've done shows like MegaCon in Orlando. I've done, I didn't do C2E2, but I do Anime NYC, and I've done Baltimore Comic Con, Awesome Con. And when I was a kid, I remember artist alleys were all the comic guys, right?
Right.
And now, like, I just did Terrificon, and it's an amazing show. Like Jay,
Terrificon, yeah, beautiful.
I've heard so many good things about Terrificon.
Yeah, the guy Mitch that runs it is super nice, and that really does trickle down. He loves comics, so you get that comic crowd.
You can feel it, you can see it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see it. Yeah, and there's it's weird. There's an artist alley, but there's two artist alleys. There's one side is all the comic guys. So I was hanging out with Daryl Banks, because we're both fans of kaiju stuff, and we were shooting the breeze. Art Adams was there. Claremont, dude had a line for 3 days straight. And the other side of Artist Alley, there was some indie people, but it looked like a craft fair. And this isn't the first time I've seen this at these shows, where people are hanging up it's like a laundromat with all the shirts and things, and they have lights, and it's insane. And I'm selling my shirts as well. I'm not excusing myself, but I just couldn't believe I was even able to get into artist alleys when I started doing shows, because I just thought it was all pro comic guys. And then I was shocked that it was just people like me and, just crafters. It's turned into a craft fair, which is nuts. So there's definitely a shift, and Comic-Con was definitely eye-opening for me, seeing there's also talking about people that buy up a lot of real estate. I think it's something Panda and then V something. They had 3 giant booth areas on the exhibitor floor.
Yeah.
And it's basically one company that has 2 different, companies underneath them. And then they buy these giant booths and hire all these artists and make all this acrylic. It's gimmick shit, it doesn't look like real art to me. It's all brightly lit, and they got they'll take the art and do this acrylic finish on it. It's kind of hard to explain unless you've seen it, but it just looks gaudy. It really just looks like a bunch of Guidos went in there and said, "Oh, I'm going to make a bunch of artwork." I don't know. I'm saying it horribly, but you grew up in Staten Island or South Brooklyn. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think you know what I'm talking about. It's just gaudy shit. It just looks awful. So that's my 2 cents.
You know it was funny though, because you're speaking of Artist Alley, and I always took Artist Alley. My first shows were Wizard World Philly back probably 20 something years ago at this point in time. And we would go down there, and I loved the Artist Alleys. They were quieter shows. They were intimate, I guess. I would meet top artists, top writers without much wait time, and it was really pretty cool. but I always took it as the artist. I'm like, oh, these are artists. These are artists. And as a writer, I never actually considered myself in that light. I was always like, oh, these are the guys who draw the books. They're the artists. They're the inkers. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute. No, writers are allowed in there too. You're allowed to actually sell your finished books. You're allowed to. I thought that was really, really interesting. You know, that's where I met. It pains me to say it, but like Keith Giffen was in an artist alley when I met him. And, you know, his big thing was, you know, don't quit your day job. It's like, oh, you're going to work in comics. Don't quit your day job. And that was the big shtick back then. And that stuck with me, ironically enough.
Great advice.
It was great advice. But it was more eye-opening seeing him out there, seeing Jim Shooter in Artist Alley. And I'm like, wait a minute, if they can be an Artist Alley, you know, why can't I get an Artist Alley? And then I started, you know, looking at shows, applying to different shows. And that was, you know, again, moving forward. One book comes out, you're like, oh, now I'm an Artist Alley. It changes so much as an up and coming, you know, creator, getting yourself on instead of walking to editors, instead of walking to companies like Robo, you said at Marvel, you know, they want you to do work over there. I would question, does that involve you going to Marvel, or is Marvel coming to you in Artist Alley? Because that's usually where things start to, like, make connections, you know, you start talking to people and getting to know people.
Right. Well, it's funny because the last Artist Alley I did at NYCC was 2021. And at the end of the show, like literally the last day, I had all my kaiju art up and I had an Ultraman piece up, you know, just propped up on my table, just like sitting right there. And the guy comes over to me, really nice guy, and he goes, oh, I saw your Ultraman art from across the hall. I said, oh, cool. He goes, I'm Kyle. Oh, I'm John. Nice to meet you. And I'm tired, you know, that show, it's like a monster. And he goes, yeah, I write the Ultraman comic for Marvel. And I went, oh, okay. So immediately, like, I woke up. And yeah, look, I like your work, and, you know, maybe I can get you a cover gig. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he had his own, he's got his own creator-owned book, Radiant Black, and he tried to get me on that. But that's sort of what got me to pay attention to it. And then I know this guy, Jeff Gomez, who is responsible for bringing Ultraman to the States, he's been trying to get me in contact with them, and like editors like Tom Brevoort and those guys. I've emailed them, but again, it's like I said, I'm so busy with my stuff. I mean, you know, at some point I'll maybe reach out to them again because they're doing some Ultraman Avengers crossover next year at Marvel. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. You know, it's comics are a business, right? Like they want the biggest names out there. Like they don't want a fan artist. They don't. I'm not trying to discount what I'm doing, but they want a name. They got to sell a name. So I get it. But yeah, Artist Alley I find is where you make a lot of the really good connections, more so than the exhibition hall.
Oh, definitely. Artist Alley is where you get networking done.
Yeah.
It's true. It's funny how you say, you know, they want the big names, because it's like, do you make your name at the big two, or do you make your name at the independents? And then where do you go? Once you make your name, you know, again, I could go back to Kirkman. He made his name at Image. He made his name on the independents, you know, Battle Pope. You know, he made a name, had that risk with Invincible, and had the, you know, again, Walking Dead was a risk there. And once he made his name and became, you know, what he was with those books, he didn't need Marvel. He didn't need DC. He took his time going there, but it's like it's a catch-22. They want named writers, they want named artists, and then at the same time, it's like, well, you got to make your name somewhere. You know, there was a point in time where DC, I know, was taking risks on writers like Scott Snyder. I mean, he comes from that. They just found him at a local Barnes and Noble. I think it was a Borders. And they liked what he was saying. You know, it was some kind of open read, and they just liked what they heard and gave him a shot. And look where he is now. So it's one of those weird catches. It's like, you know, you need experience, but I need to get a job to get experience, that type of thing.
But it's so
I think
funny.
they're also good.
And I was gonna say, the big two now, they don't like this creator based type of thing, because, you know, before it was like John Byrne, Chris Claremont. You know, these were the names that made Marvel Comic and DC Comics. You know, and now they're trying to avoid the name being bigger than the Marvel or DC. Yeah, and I feel like that leads to different places. You know, it's a weird place to be.
Yeah.
Well, you can look at that, you know, right back to wrestling. You know, back in the day, the 80s, it's Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan sells tickets.
Yeah.
You know, Ultimate Warrior sells tickets, and you know, this is my wrestling nostalgia kicking in, right?
Sergeant Rourke. Oh, sorry. Sergeant
No.
Slaughter.
Sergeant
thinking-
Slaughter sells tickets.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Heck,
Sarge,
you know,
you go back in the 90s, you had Hogan versus Slaughter and you know,
Yep.
the Macho Man, the Macho King. These guys are
Ooh.
selling
Yeah.
names.
the Macho Man. Ooh.
That you could go, man. Steve Austin, The Rock, you know,
Oh yeah.
but during that time, something strange started happening and they started promoting WWE. And now if
Yeah.
you look at any card, it's like tickets are sold out because WWE is coming to town. They're not promoting that superstar wrestler anymore. They're promoting the company.
Yeah.
Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But you know, when you promote the company, it's almost like it doesn't matter who's in that headlining spot.
Yep.
Although when John
Exactly.
Cena came back recently, all of a sudden it was like a spike in ticket sales. So I hear.
You know,
So-
it's tough, man, and it bugs me out what you're saying because it's what it is. You know, as soon as one of these guys ends up in Marvel and DC, even though they don't want to promote it, they start making sales to their comics. So you sit there going,
I mean, there are certain books though that are almost like writer proof. Like if you pick up a Batman book or put a name Batman on a book, that's why there's like 15 Batman books a month. Spider-Man books tend to sell very well.
You say that, but I my Batman writer is Chuck Dixon, and everybody else after that is kind of like they do things in Batman.
But I think that's the perfect example, right? When Chuck Dixon leaves Batman, when Chuck Dixon leaves Robin, Batman's sales may have slid a little bit, but he didn't go away. You know, it's like, you know, Batman, now you're getting my history of comics going here. Batman in the Golden Age was almost canceled. Iron Man was almost canceled.
Oh yeah, all those books, yeah.
You know, I mean, when you think about those titles, Thor was nothing until the MCU movies hit, and then these books became like basically like bulletproof, really. But Batman was the 60s sitcom, Adam West's show.
Yep.
You know,
That was
Spike's
the best
Batman.
version of Batman that ever happened.
I agree. That's my best
I don't
version.
know, man. There's this 92 cartoon out there that might take the cake, but
Yeah,
For the animated series.
oh yeah.
I'm with you on that
That's a
one.
good one.
I love Adam West, but
Second place in my heart. Adam
Oh.
West will always be first place.
Yeah.
you can't go wrong with Adam West. I mean, I do
No,
have
you
the
can't.
DVD
It's so much
Blu-ray
fun.
box set or something like that. So, but yeah, so certain books, you know, Chuck Dixon leaves Batman. Batman is still strong. You know,
Yeah.
in all the implosion of the comics in the late 90s, Batman's still selling.
Oh yeah. Sold all the way through, no matter who was writing.
And that's my point. You know, and then you look at certain writers that can boost the book. You know, Grant Morrison comes to mind. If you ever get Alan Moore in a book, you put Alan Moore's name in a book, it's probably going to sell just crazy amounts. You know, there's just a couple of writers that, like, I don't know, for a long time it was Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman's name was on a book, and I was like, all right, give me that book.
Oh yeah, that was fire. Yeah.
So, and I still think that's true. You know, you mentioned Radiant Black with Kyle Higgins. I mean, he's growing that little, what do they call it, the massive verse. He's growing that like crazy.
Yeah.
You know, Scott Snyder is doing the same thing. Scott Snyder made his name with Batman, but you know, and American Vampire too. But you know, he's coming out with the whole thing with Comixology at the time, and he has a whole bunch of stuff that right now, you know, again, you put his name on a book. Brian K. Vaughan, you mentioned Saga before. These are names in my world. You know, there was a long time where Jeff Loeb's name was on a book, or better than that, Jeff Loeb / Tim Sale. You put those two names on a book, and it was like,
oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Great the color books.
Great combo.
So, you know, there's certain titles I think that are just going to sell no matter what. And then there are certain creative teams that are going to carry a title. You know, I mean, Bendis and Bagley on Ultimate Spider-Man did wonderful jobs. When Bendis left that book, it became a little bit of a struggle. But yeah, so there you go. That's my rant. I'm ranting today on random things right now.
Well, that's why we like the show. It's the geek out.
Yeah, that's what the show is all about.
And Ryder, you get Ninja Prime over there cameoing.
But Jay, if I can sort of piggyback off of what you're saying, because I didn't know that about WWE, because there's something more insidious going on, not only with comics and WWE, but also with Hollywood too. If you notice that the celebrity has sort of died out because it's been the rise of IP, And you can get anyone to play. I mean, I don't think you can get anyone to play Iron Man at this point. Like it's Robert Downey. There's no changing that.
I can make an argument against that.
I mean, there's an argument to be made for all the Marvel casting choices, but now it's they're devaluing creatives, and that's the scary part. Not to make this about AI, but that's the other scary thing about AI. Like it's just a continuing devaluation of the creatives, because when you think of Marvel, you think of the movies, and now with Kevin Feige and those guys taking over the book side of it, it's like I feel like the books have been devalued to the point where now it's just like a testing ground for what's going to work in the movies. So they'll say, "Oh, there's going to be a female Black Panther." Guess what? 6 months later in the movie, there's a female Black Panther. It's like, well, let's test the market and see what happens. And it's just been across the board. They just want to, they think their characters are more important. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise is like, doing crazy business at the movies with his Mission Impossible franchise because it's Tom Cruise. I think he's the last one, but again, it's just this sort of industry by industry rise of just devaluing the creative.
I can agree with you.
Yeah, actually, like comics themselves were never really meant to be sustainable by the companies. Like they're always just trying to create new IPs to see what works and like what's going to get a major movie deal, what's going to get like a TV show deal, and then like if it doesn't pan out, then they just cancel the series and they move on to something else. Like
I remember I was working on Men in Black 3 years ago, like one of my first jobs in the union. And my friend was friends with Howard Porter and Ron Garney, two, pretty established artists. And he told me one of them, I don't know who, was driving a bus because, in between jobs. And we're over there painting something for a location. And he gets on the phone with Ron or Howard, I don't remember who. And he goes, "Hey, John, I'm talking to, so-and-so. Do you have anything you want to say to him?" Like, "Yeah, tell him to hire, like get me hired on a book." And he tells them, and then he comes back he says, "Keep this job. It's much better." It was like 2010, 2011 or something like that. So that's what I do. Like, I was new to the union and I was like, man, should I have gone into comics? And then when that happened, I said, yeah, okay.
You made the right move.
Yeah.
You made the right move.
See, it's also weird because I think Hollywood is becoming less of a risk taker. They want surefire hits, and I get it. But I get the formulas always work for Disney, right? But I get the idea of you want to make sure you're going to make money. You want to make sure that you're not going to just lose things. You look at a guy like Kevin Smith, who's taken nothing but risks throughout all of his movies, and they've, I mean, minimal success at the box office. Yeah, but yet the guy has a cult following, sells. When DVDs came, he was selling DVDs like crazy. Mallrats was a bust until it was released on DVD. And then from there,
actually, no, I got all the movies.
Yeah, no, but that's his way of really making money. He got a following, a fan base. You go back to that independent mindset. How many people are going to follow him? How many people support him? And I think Hollywood's doing something along the lines where taking a risk isn't something that they want to do anymore. That's why they test it out in comics. How does this work? This works with this audience in comics. Yeah. This formula works. If you watch Iron Man, then you watch Ant-Man back to back, you probably will see the same movie. But that formula has been the Disney formula for as long as they've made Disney movies. There's a couple of books that you can look at that talk about the way the hero's journey is presented and how Disney would hand this out to their writers before they started working on a script. So then you get the Little Mermaid, you get Aladdin, you get the Lion King, you get Tarzan. And if you watch those movies, you can check off boxes on the hero's journey formula. So they're minimizing their risk however they can. And it goes back to, like you said, with Iron Man, I can make the argument. Robert Downey Jr. doesn't need to be Iron Man. He needs to be Tony Stark. So, it goes back to Captain America. We had Captain America. We had Steve Rogers. Well, they're currently working on a new Captain America that does come from the comics. You saw Falcon and Winter Soldier and how that one worked out. But again, the idea, the property, the Captain America property, the Captain America Iron Man, Riri Williams, I'm sure is on the way up for something along those lines, or even like the Marvels movie coming out. next month, about a couple weeks.
Yeah.
You have 3 Miss Marvels all I guess they're 3 Miss Marvels, but they're pretty much.
Yeah, they've all been, well, yeah, let me see. 2 of them have been Captain Marvel, and 2 of them have been Miss Marvel.
So there you go. It's, it is, if comics is a testing ground for what works in movies, I'm going to take that as a positive on the comic side of things, only because if it's a lost leader, they're still making the comics. And some of these comics are so phenomenal. I mean, how many people still talk about the death of Superman?
Yeah, that was
great.
Great series. Yeah.
Bane breaking someone's back, or the risk of Frank Miller writing The Dark Knight Returns. You talk about risk.
Yeah.
These are books that don't go away because everyone's trying to mimic that in these movies, to different successes, of course.
That's because they take the book and go, we don't need this, and they do it their own way.
But they like the book. So I was talking to somebody the other day. So speaking of books and what we do and don't need, right? I was talking to a friend the other day, and they're like, oh, this movie, I don't even remember what movie it was, but it's so horrible they didn't even pay attention to the comic. And I'm like, well, there's this movie from 1990 that paid really close attention to the comic, and it's that Ninja Turtles movie. I'm like, I watched that 2 weeks ago with my son, and I'm still loving everything about that. Like,
exactly.
It's the best one. It's the best Ninja Turtle movie.
Yeah.
But it's because the first one.
Yeah. I mean, it's like even the costumes and everything held up really well because they put effort into it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. In fact, we saw the new one in theaters, Mutant Mayhem, and I'm sitting there and I'm just like the old man, like, what is this? What are these creative choices? And I was so annoyed that, like, when I got home, I put on the OG movie and I was just happy.
Exactly.
I was so happy.
Go Ninja, go. Oh.
I think that's what sparked it for my son. My son does, anyone who follows me, or if you follow Ninja Prime on Instagram, he does Ninja Warrior training. That's like his passion.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the name Ninja Prime comes from. The American Ninja Warrior and Transformers, and Ninja Turtles. And he had a competition, and he's talking to the guy. Like, there's this guy with like, I don't know, I guess an iPod or something with music. And he looks at me, he gives me 2 thumbs up and smirks. I'm like, I don't know what he just did. And then all of a sudden, he's about to run. The countdown starts, and I hear Ninja Rap. And I'm like, my son just actually got to play Ninja Rap so he could run his course run with Vanilla Ice. I'm like, this kid's 11 years old. He didn't even know who Vanilla Ice was.
That is amazing, though.
Oh, it was great. And he's dancing down the course. He's running this course and like doing like, the Ninja Rap dance from Ninja Turtles 2. And I'm like, damn, this kid's awesome.
You did something right.
Yeah.
So, but those movies, at least the first one. The second one obviously veered off course because they had success with the first one. I still love it. I still love the third one too. I don't care what anybody says. I love that third one. Yeah. They took really quality stuff from the comics. It's like, I didn't discuss spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the OG Ninja Turtles 1. I didn't know they killed Shredder until like early 2000s. I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I want to read this book. And I got a reprint copy and I read it. I'm like, wait a minute, they killed Shredder? Like, what? Yeah. So that was, I thought that was a movie one thing. I didn't realize that was a comic thing back in the day. But I was
the whole Raphael scene, when he leaves, he storms out of the apartment and he's fighting the Foot Clan. And then they drop him through the skylight. And then they're fighting and they burn down the bookstore. I had that comic from, I bought it from Jim Hanley's Universe in Staten Island. It was like the big oversized graphic novel. And that was the whole book was that part of the movie, but it was Leo in the book.
Yes.
And he fights him in like a construction site. Then it ends up in the apartment and they burn it all down. And it's the same thing. I went, oh my God, it blew my mind. I'm like, wow, they just because back then, comic book movies like the first Dolph Lundgren Punisher, they just made that shit up. Like,
oh my God,
it was just
they shouldn't have called that Punisher.
Yeah, I mean, he looked cool.
Well, it did punish the audience for watching it.
Yeah, they did.
David Hasselhoff is Nick Fury.
Yeah,
Nick
exactly.
Oh my God.
even that first X-Men movie was the same thing. Bryan Singer was like, I'm gonna just make up this weird story.
Exactly.
They just did whatever the fuck they wanted. I'm sorry, I mean to curse, but they just did whatever they wanted. So it was nice to see that book was translated so well to the big screen.
Yeah.
What was interesting though about that movie, the X-Men movie, That was like I think like every person in life. I went through my early years of comics, going to 7-Eleven, picking up books off the racks.
Yep.
Then, discovering comic shops, which happened to be Death of Superman, Bane Batman, you talk about Chuck Dixon. And then I veer off of comics like everybody else in my teenage years. But I started coming back to comics around that time X-Men came out and Ultimate Spider-Man. I always credit Ultimate Spider-Man for really getting me into writing comics. But what I noticed with that X-Men book was Marvel started aiming their comics and redesigning their characters to kind of mirror the movies.
Yeah.
And I think it's working in reverse now, where instead of that, like people are more like, I want to see Wolverine in his yellow costume, man. Or Deadpool.
I want to see a comic book movie that's a comic book movie. I'm again with the darkness and all this other stuff. Look, dude, I'm watching a comic book. My biggest pet peeve is somebody who goes, "Well, it's not realistic. It's a comic book movie." It's not realistic.
but there is something to be said about not filming every goddamn scene in front of a green screen, like Ant-Man.
I agree. Yeah.
Ant-Man 3, it just looked like one of the Star Wars prequels. Whereas if you watch that first Ninja Turtles or the first Batman or any of the Superman, the OG Superman movies.
Oh my God, beautiful stuff.
Or even Winter Soldier. I mean, to me, that's my favorite Marvel movie. And that, there is some CGI stuff, but they're on a freighter, they're in a car. I mean, they're in real locations, and that's a lot. That's something I think Marvel's been taking a lot of heat for the last few years, actually, which I think is a good thing.
The sad thing is that even Star Wars started off like that. Star Wars started off by making everything. Yeah. Then they went into CGI. I loved it better when they were making it.
Because it just looked better.
Mm-hmm. It does. And in fact, like the other day, I had this Godzilla movie on. My wife was watching it, and there's like this insect creature, and he kills these people, and then it walks onto a wall, and my wife is into it, but then it starts shedding its skin, and a CGI insect comes out, and she's like, "It just lost me. Like it looked cool and weird and creepy, and sure, it's Japanese, and the budget's like a fraction of a Hollywood movie, but then the CGI dragonfly comes out, and she's like, it just looks awful, Like you look at like aliens, right? And those aliens, you feel like you can reach into the screen and touch them. Yeah. Then you watch Alien Covenant and you see that CGI alien running around. Yeah. Or what was it, Alien 3, when the alien's swimming underwater and it just looked terrible?
I remember that.
Yeah, it's just like doing like this weird like swim and it looks really bad.
I think
they try to make the scene really dark so you can't see how bad the CGI is.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes. And it's like, it's weird. Like somebody along the lines in Hollywood just made this decision that, we're going to do everything CGI. It's not cheaper. And it was the same thing with like the whole Pixar style animation. Yeah. There was no reason for it to explode the way it did, where every company had to do that. They just woke up one day and said, this is how it's going to be now. When 2D animation was like, it was fine. It just literally happened like overnight.
But you know what it is? It goes back to that formula thing, and the companies wanting to make things cheap as possible so they can make the most money. When you're paying all those animators to make those Disney movies, you're paying a lot of people to make those movies.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So now it's like, how do we make it cheaper? Get rid of all those artists.
Oh no! If they can press a button and replace like my job and everyone else, they would definitely. Yeah, well, that's why everyone went on strike, and then
exactly
this is what happens. But yeah, if they could press a button and make tons of money, I could tell you that's a whole other live stream. I could go on and on.
That's like a 3-hour rant from each of us. Right?
Yeah, I could go on and on about that. But anyway, yes, I don't know. It's kind of like. If they just made like reels, even what they did on Mandalorian, I know it was like that big LED screen they used, but that still looked really good. And there was like real rocks in front of it. I mean, even going that route is something for them to consider rather than just giant CGI cityscapes,
But when that happens, you get a movie like Prey that comes out and it takes off because you have a predator, you have a girl in the woods. I mean, I don't know if you guys have all seen that movie, but it's like because you can watch at home and you're like, they're interacting, they're hitting each other, they're really, the CGI is minimal at best.
Exactly.
And when it's used in at just somewhat now and again, it tends to hit better because, I mean, like, again, I'll go to my son. My son we watched Jurassic Park 93, the original Jurassic Park, and you can see, it's 93, so you could see the CGI and how early it was, but you could also tell, like, there's a dinosaur on that screen. They built a dinosaur right there.
Yeah, to do that roar. Ah.
Yep, that was a good scene.
Yeah, I think most of those shots in that movie are the practical dinosaur.
Exactly.
I think they said there's like 7 CGI shots in the whole movie.
Yeah, which is kind of amazing.
It was better like that. I'm like, CGI is interesting, but I want them to get creative. I want them to make things.
Well, it's like the 3D movie.
It feels like the interaction is different.
3D.
Yeah, it feels like they're on completely different planes of existence almost when they have like a CGI monster.
I feel like that's why the fan movies do so well, is because you have to work with what you have, and you have to work with real stuff instead of working with CGI because you can't afford it.
Yeah.
So, folks, there you see what happens usually on this show. We went through 10,000 geeky talks. All right, so to get back to YouTube and what you do, Robo, give them your spiel one more time, and I'll show your stuff up here on the screen. Go for it.
Sure. Robo 7 Art. I make officially licensed Ultraman T-shirts and art prints, as well as tons of Kaiju fan art, like that's popped up on the screen. If you want to track me down and tell me a funny story or tell me how much you love Godzilla, you can find me at Instagram's probably the best. It's just at Robo7, but it's Robo7 spelled out because some soulless SOB took the Robo7 name, so I had to come up with something else. Or you just go to my website, www.robo7.com, which is what you're showing on the screen. All my social media stuff is on there. And I also founded Kaiju Brooklyn, which is a kaiju-themed convention here in Brooklyn, New York. You can also find that on my social media as well. And there's a Kaiju Brooklyn Instagram page. Has all the information. And that's my spiel. My next convention will be Anime NYC in November. And hopefully I see some of you guys there.
I was about to ask you that question, and it's good to hear that you got into Anime NYC because a lot of our people didn't get into Anime NYC, so I'm happy to hear somebody else is there.
Yeah,
I've never gotten into Anime NYC. I'm so salty about it.
Yeah,
and it's funny because it would be perfect for you, Sorcier.
I know. It's insulting. One year, next year, I'm gonna fight someone and I'll get in.
sorry to hear that. I know they had like 2,500 submissions or something.
Yeah,
artists, and even like I've been doing this since 2018, and my friend Lenny, who's another kaiju artist, he didn't get in this year, and his stuff is like fantastic. So,
and that's what we've been hearing about this year is like a lot of the great artists that they usually are there.
Yeah,
they didn't get back in.
Yeah, so now I'm curious to know, like, what the hell am I walking into?
Did agents buy up a bunch of tables? I wonder.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, what's going on.
I feel like Anime NYC wouldn't fall for that though, because the whole reason they started was to be different from Comic Con and like Comic Con's Anime Fest or whatever. Like,
so let me tell you a secret here.
Oh,
yo,
are you allowed to say it on air?
Work in NYCC got hired by Anime NYC, so now those guys that used to work at NYCC are running the show at Anime NYC.
Oh wait, is it Reed Pop or is it just someone?
No, it's not Reed Pop. It's just former workers of NYCC.
Still gross.
Well, you know what happened, right? I know the guy used to run it. He left, and he's at Japan Society, and we talk to him pretty regularly. He's a great guy, and
he's a great guy. Yeah,
he's a great guy. And that show, man, they've always treated me really well, better than a certain other giant convention in the Javits Center. And they've always been really good. And I remember when they left to do Anime NYC, and New York Comic Con was like, "Oh yeah, we'll show you." Remember when they made their own anime show? But
and it was terrible.
It was awful. It was like Pier 92 and like. Which was like, way up on the West Side Highway, and like nobody went, and it died pretty quick.
I tabled there, and I even wish that I wasn't there because it was so bad. It's like, why am I here? It was literally just like vendors selling stuff to other vendors and just like passing the $20 around. Like there was hardly any attendees.
Oh, that's bad.
Saddest thing ever.
But if you go to Comic-Con now, the entire floor is like anime. Like there's
Anime.
a giant Goku and One Piece, and it's I'm like, what is this? What are they just basically combined, their anime stuff with their comic show.
Yeah.
And it all looks the same.
It does.
Exactly. The funny thing was that, remember when before they did this because they kicked anime out of NYCC.
Yeah.
They had their own section in NYCC, and then one year they said we don't want you anymore, and they kicked them out.
Yeah.
And then they got pissed off when Anime NYC said, well, we're gonna fill in that hole because you guys haven't had anime in your convention for a couple of years. And then they got pissed off because they did well.
Yeah, and then I think in 2018 they tried to bring back Anime Fest, and they had it at the same time as New York Comic Con, but Anime Fest was like 30 blocks away.
Yep.
On the same weekend. It's like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, make up your minds. This is shameful.
Nobody plans this stuff. Oh my God. So Jay, after all that.
Sorry, Jay.
No, we're talking.
Oh, no, that was perfect.
Listen, I could do this all day. It's all good.
Oh yeah.
So, again, Justicane and Potico is on Kickstarter. If you want to really shove it to Evil Kip, by all means, get that Evil Kip cover.
Yeah, stick it to Kip. You should make a stick it to Kip sticker.
Oh my goodness,
dude!
Forget that.
A sticker, a pin.
So, but in all seriousness, the Adventures of Justicane and Potico. If you're into any kind of comedy in a comic book, if you love comics, it's a passion project, but really, I mean, here's how I know it's a winner. I'll be honest with you. I made my wife read it. She hates reading comics with a passion. She gets to this one part, and I see her just curl over in the chair, and I'm like, oh, I see what happened there. She's like, she just started laughing so hard that I'm like, that's awesome. That's how you know you have a winner. Big fans of Bill and Ted in this house, so that's really the type of humor we're dealing with. You've heard I could wax nostalgia for WWE wrestling. It's all in there, and then just sprinkle Greek mythology on top. All the characters.
You're just talking my language.
It's all the characters in some way tie into basically those WWF gods as they were are literal gods in this book. And that's really the setting of the story. So check it out on Kickstarter, Adventures of Justicane and Potico. If you want to find me, Jay Huwer on any socials. I do have a website with writing samples, jasonhuwer.com. But that's it. You want to spam Evil Kip. He's on that. What do they call it? X now. Feel free to spam him. We had a hashtag going. What? Stick it to Kip. But yeah, I mean, I love this book. So if 5 people buy it, what do we have? 14 people buy it. Those 14 people are going to enjoy everything about this book. Like I said, it was made out of a funny haha. So it's a funny haha book. There you go. And so have you read it, Ralph?
I haven't had a chance to. I've been dealing with my computer.
You're gonna get the Kip treatment, dude.
Oh no!
Don't go there.
Well, good.
There's gonna be a stick it to Ralph cover and like part 2. It's gonna be a whole thing.
Part 2.
I like how he says that.
Part 2 next week.
I have a question for Jay. I have a question for you. Excellent Adventure or Bogus Journey?
Excellent Adventure.
Ooh.
Wow. See, I'm the opposite. We were raised with Bogus Journey. Like Death is just the best character ever. And Station.
No, it was for me. Excellent Adventure hit. The comics hit. Again, it's that bubble of my life where it's like something about this movie's wrong. Like with my kids, we'll do. I'm an 80s kid. If you haven't figured that out yet. We'll do inappropriate movies from when I was a kid, and I'll sit down. My kids like jump on the couch. It's like the greatest family night ever because they're totally into this. Because I'm like, guys, these movies are totally inappropriate. You should not be watching them. They're like, well, why are you letting us? I'm like, well, because they're PG. And they just look at me, they're like, what? So we've watched like Goonies, and the jokes. My son still quotes Goonies randomly in the most inappropriate way. He's like, it's mom's favorite part. I'm like, can you stop with that line? And then he pointed to an area of the statue, of course. And Bill and Ted fell into that category. And Excellent Adventure, when I was a kid, I was always like, something about this just, it's great, but it's wrong. It's like it felt forbidden. And I watched it repeatedly. I enjoy Bogus Journey, but Excellent Adventure. I mean, then there's that third one.
We won't talk about that one. We're not
What third one?
Exactly.
So, but yeah, so if you want to watch inappropriate movies, go to the 80s and watch things like, you know, Ghostbusters and start laughing at the jokes in there and be like, that's wrong. There's a ghost in the bed and there's what is happening right now?
I recently rewatched, it was the first one. It was like the amount of things that went over my head as a kid is like, oh, wow. I can't believe I was allowed to watch that.
Even Roger Rabbit. I remember going to see Roger Rabbit in theaters with my dad. And I look back now and I'm like, what were you guys thinking?
Same.
Oh, there's my.
Those were the days, man.
I can keep going, man. You know? Like I laugh because I'll tell my students, you know, we talk about suspense. And I'm like, you want to watch a really suspenseful movie? And I tell the kids, I'm like, I am not telling you you're allowed to watch this movie. That's between your parents and you. I'm like, go watch Jaws. They're like, what? I'm like, guys, it's PG. And everyone's always like shocked when they hear that. I'm like, yeah, that's a PG movie.
Yeah.
And it's wild when you think about it. I'm like, how did they get the sharks killing people, blood in the water, skinny dipping to open the whole movie?
Yeah, what were the standards back then?
There was no PG-13.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, there was a movie that came out in the 80s that I think was I can't remember what it was.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Steven Spielberg fought for a PG-13 for that movie.
Right, so that was the movie. Okay.
That was the one.
Yeah.
And I can see why, because that face melting stuff.
I just wonder how he managed to do that. Like that's the part I want to know. Like, how does Spielberg have that kind of pull where he's like, we can't do PG straight to R. We need a PG-13. And he got it.
Wow. Well, the second movie probably should have been rated R when the guy ripping out the guy's beating heart from his chest.
Like I said, inappropriate movies from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Dude, people talk about it all the time. I'm like, and it's funny because I always say, like, I saw that as a kid. It didn't bother me.
No, it didn't bother me either.
Yeah, it's like, you know, people think that if you see it as a kid, like someone getting their heart ripped out or whatever, it's going to be super traumatizing. But as a kid, you're like, wow, that is the coolest thing that I've ever seen in my life. Like, how do I do that? Well, I guess that's probably why they don't want me to see it. But
today's kids just go on the internet and they see all this stuff. I mean,
yeah.
It's be way worse than what we saw.
Absolutely.
They hear way worse than what we.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. So Wednesday, if you guys are going to join us for the written writ, you will find that we will have Rob Longo and the guys from Pocus Hocus hanging out to kick off their Kickstarter. And of course, Rob Longo is moving towards his premiere of The Husband this Friday in Jersey. So, you know, we're going to have a special spooktacular written writ this Wednesday with some interesting people. And Madison Sierra will be there too.
Yeah, you're not rid of me ever. I'm here now. I live here. Nothing you can do about it.
Oh my God. And I think there's a bunch of stuff that I probably should be showing you guys, but I'll show it to you on Wednesday.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll show it to you on Wednesday. So guys, any final words before we go?
Brush your teeth.
That's a good
Everyone. Yes. Right now.
Shower every day.
That too.
So when I was we're having fun with this one. So when I was a kid, I used to have this Masters of the Universe alarm clock. It was like an old school analog clock. You get the little thing, like you could hear it click and click, click, click as it went around. And when the alarm went off, there was this whole saying, and one of the best phrases, and Ralph, you can end on this one, was it was this whole rhyme, and it was like He-Man saying, brush your teeth and make it snappy.
Nice.